Hello, this is Mark Armani. We're doing a short bonus episode today. It was requested on Tracking Song, a novella by Wolfe from 1975. Now, my style is just to kind of go right to the point, right? Initially, when I was asked to do this, there hadn't been many resources online. I kind of put it off. Now there are going to be some resources coming out here. The Gene Wolfe Literary Podcast has 4 synopsis episodes that I'll link to. I have a write-up as well that I'm going to go ahead and link to that's on the Earth list there from 6 years ago, right? And so I do think that I kind of got to the bottom of this story. So real quickly, I'm just going to read something that Wolfe said in an interview with Joan Gordon here about this particular story. So I'm just going to read this to start with. A pivotal story for me is one in which I feel I've succeeded in doing well, something I've never really done well before. Fairy material in Thag, a certain religious viewpoint in West Wind, the use of second and third person in The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories, the progression from realism to fantasy in The Eye of Flash Miracles, even the primitive inventions no one ever actually invented, and which no one now notices in Tracking Song. Just as Tracking Song is about uninvented inventions of the Stone Age, Straw is about, partly of course, uninvented inventions of the Middle Ages. Tracking Song is a wolf totem story, by the way. The protagonist gets his original orientation from a wolf tribe, then lives in a world in which the roles of moose, lion, deer, mink, and so on are taken by semi-human beings. Wolves are winter symbols, of course, and birds symbols of spring. So obviously this contextualizes the progression in the story that Cutthroat receives as he's oriented by a wolf tribe, right? Then he goes in with Pamagaki, who are more like boars. Then he hangs out with Sim Glowing, who seems to be like a mink or an otter, right, from that female orientation there. It might be difficult to parse that without his quote, but my write-up goes into the breakdown of some of those tribes and what they represent. At the very end, right after he's gone through everything and he's seen the degenerate remains of humanity on this planet in the form of Manchu and his Min, M-I-N, right, who are kind of like part machine and part man. Cutthroat is laying there, and he's looking up and he sees these winged beings. He's like, are those wings? And so here Wolfe reveals, right, quite clearly that those are totemic bird indications of the coming of spring. And this contextualizes the entire reading, right? Because in addition to the totemic story, Wolfe is very interested in archetypal patterns. And so in this one, right, I do think it's worthwhile in understanding that Wolfe is riffing a little bit on the basic thesis of Sir James Frazier's Golden Bough, right, where there is a king, and that a sacrifice is necessary, a sacrifice of some kind that has been entrenched in so many myths and so many stories of a good person, right? The sacrifice of something worthwhile so that spring can come. And here, rather than being a criminal or somebody outcast from his society, what is happening is that this whole setup is a test of the upraised species, right? Mankind is terraforming this planet this planetoid or asteroid or whatever it is, more or less. There's lesser gravity than on Earth. Cutthroat is stronger than he looks because he was raised in a lower gravity environment. Trees look different to him because he was raised in a lower gravity environment. Even though he doesn't have conscious memories, right? He has some kind of understanding of what trees should be, like this Platonic ideal from his planetary origin. So I would say that Cutthroat, from the way people treat him, is an example of humanity or what humanity has become. And the rest of these creatures are uplifted from wolves or, moose or whatever it is there. And that he has been left behind as a test, not for him, but for the people of the planet, to see if they're ready to accept the return of humanity and walk hand in hand with someone who was once their superior. So this is kind of an elevation story where it's like, hey, are these individuals human or are they not? Well, do they have to be from human man stock in order to be human? So as he goes along there, Cutthroat is a test and he doesn't even know it, right? the sled that he's following, is listening in on what he says and reports, but they don't give him any indication because he has to be like a helpless child here, an innocent, to see how he responds and how those tribes respond to him. Do they help him? Do they hinder him? Do they kill him? So the reason that he's cutthroat, the reason there, even though there is the scar there, right? That's a symbol. It's a symbol that he is the sacrifice that has been cast out for the coming of spring. He's the spring sacrifice. That's what he is. Spring is going to be coming there when the birds at the end show up. Now, there is the sense, too, that there's some Christian iconography associated with this, right? That, hey, you're being raised up here, you're returning to the heavens. The question is he seeing a valid vision? Has the sled sped up because he's dying? I think, right, that what has happened is the sled has accelerated to come up behind him there when his life signs are beginning to dim and he's going to die. He still may die. I think for the story to fully work on a symbolic level, he has to be the sacrifice to test the people, right? And I'm going to call them people. The upraised people of the planet who are not from the original stock of humanity there that is in the sleigh, that gives them kind of the vision of walking hand in hand with them and being a part of the human community. So we have a very simple terraforming story where Cutthroat's memories have been intentionally suppressed or limited so that he can be a tabula rasa, right? He can be a blank slate for this environment to work upon, to see if he's accepted and welcomed or if he's just killed outright. And I think that the animals who are upraised to humanity pass this test by and large, right? Because who's the monster? It's the degenerate remains of humanity that are left behind there on the planet in the form of Manchu. So I do think that Cutthroat is genetically human, or what humans will become in that far future, and that this whole point is a spring story of renewal and terraforming that will bridge the gap in creation between the lower animals and mankind in much the way that we would say that, a sacrifice is supposed to bridge that gap between humanity and the divine there. So it's like Gene took it down a little level, but it's still based in that hierarchical principle of the divine. I think that ending there is one of his great endings. It really is. There are all kinds of other references that are going on in this, whether that be, to the Jungle Book, A Man Raised by Wolves, or Call of the Wild. But I am going to have a link that has my more involved right up there. But what I want to really emphasize is that Cutthroat is named thus because he is a sacrifice. He's not a criminal. He's not a killer. He doesn't behave in that way. He was sacrificed to test that community to see if it was ready for the return of man and the coming of spring at last, right? Because as Wolfe said, the winter totem, the wolves, right? But that spring totem that he sees at the end, the birds. So it's that totemic progression that involves somewhat remembering yourself and who you are and your place in the universe. So it's a great novella. I recommend it. I didn't want to go into too much depth, but I'm definitely going to link the Gene Wolfe Literary Podcasts. I haven't listened to the last one yet, but it's well worth listening to. They do a great and thorough job of breaking it down. Hopefully I didn't steal too much of their thunder with this. Maybe they'll have a different reading when they do their analysis episode. And I also know that Alzabo Soup. Now, when I'm talking about the creature in the story, right, the Book of the New Sun, I tend to say Alzabo, right? But when I'm talking about the podcast, I do it as they pronounce it, the Alzabo Soup. There is also going to be releasing an episode on it that's not out yet. So I apologize I took so long, but now there's going to be plenty of resources for the person who requested this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, please do take a listen to the Gene Wolfe Literary Podcast and other resources there. And I am going to be coming back soon with Home Fires and Wizard Night. I apologize for the delay. Take care.